Hi, everybody. Welcome along to this webinar, Negotiating in the Digital Age, How to Leverage Procurement Tech for Negotiation Success. I'm Jonathan O'Brien. It's great to have the chance to be with you today, this afternoon, this morning, depending on where in the world you are. And as everybody joins, be really great just to say hi. So on the chat, the main chat feature, really great to just check in and say hi, perhaps say where you're from. Be great to see what parts of the world we've got covered, because we're expecting quite a lot of people to join this call. So if you've just joined, just say hi and put something in the chat so that we know that you're there and we know which part of the world you are from. And yeah, by all means, raise the hand as well. So brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So as people are joining, people are still coming in. While we're just waiting for everybody to come in, we will have a look at the sequence for this session. So we're going to do some introductions. We're going to meet our panelists in just a moment, and we're going to just talk about why we need to think about how we leverage procurement tech for negotiation success. So I'm going to give a bit of an introduction, and then we're going to spend some time asking the panel what they think and how that can help. And really, then it's over to you. Then it's over to you for the Q&A to actually ask the real questions. So we've got about 15 minutes set aside towards the end when we'll be able to have some time to answer your questions. So just to set things up, the Q&A feature is where you put your comments. So if you haven't got that open, just find the Q&A chat. And if you want to ask a question, that's where you put the question. It also looks like the main chat is disabled, so I'm not sure you'll be able to do that. But that's okay, because as long as you put something in the Q&A chat, then we will pick some of those questions towards the end and ask them to our panelists. So great, some people are already putting stuff on the chat already. Nick, hi, Nick from Birmingham. We've got Andreas from Sweden, welcome along, Andreas, and Tony in Mexico. So please, by all means, just keep saying hi within that Q&A chat feature. If you need any help at any time, just raise your hand, and using the emojis as well. You can also just give us a reaction. So if you want to just tell us how you feel, just use one of those emoji features to give us some sort of reaction. It'd be great to hear from you. So let me now move to introduce our panelists. So we have Rasa Raoufi, who's the co-founder of Mithra AI. We have Scott Farrance, who's head of clients and partnerships for DeepStream, and myself, I'm the CEO of Positive Purchasing. And first, let me hand over to Rasa. Rasa, it's really great that you could join us on this call. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Could you just tell us in 1 minute a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Jonathan and everyone. Thank you so much for having me today on this lovely webinar. My name is Rasa Raoufi, as you just mentioned. I'm a co-founder of Mithra AI. I spend all of my education and career in supply chain design and procurement across multiple different sector. And back in 2021, I started Mithra, which is basically has one mission, and that's the same mission as I have every day, is to be working with our procurement community, practitioners, CPOs, but also a finance group to recognize and realize the power of data and be able to utilize that to make impact and hopefully overachieve the expectations and goals for the organization. Lovely to be here and looking forward to learn from you and the audience and share our perspective today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rasa. It's great to have you on board. And Scott, welcome. It's really great to have you on board as well for this webinar. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and great to be here. And yeah, hi everyone, Scott Farrance. I'm the head of clients and partnerships at DeepStream. So as the title suggests, I've got the privilege of looking after all of our wonderful customers at DeepStream. I also work with our customer success team, so everything from onboarding, ensuring that you get value from the platform, reviewing that progress, and also the privilege of working with people like yourself, Jonathan, and the team at Positive via our partnerships program. So I manage the other tech providers, consultants and people in the procurement industry that we work with, provide wider solutions to customers and go to market together. Similar to Rasa, I have a long career in procurement, almost my entire working life. First off, starting at procurement in an engineering company, actually doing the procurement before moving into the world of tech, into consulting, working alongside enterprise solutions, and then just under 3 years ago, moving into the startup world at DeepStream. So yeah, a real kind of mix of enterprise, industry, and then the startup space. And yeah, really looking forward to today's conversations and hearing input from the audience as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing from you in just a bit. And I'm Jonathan O'Brien. I'm the CEO of Positive Purchasing, and I have worked in procurement so long that my hair was brown when I started first working in procurement. It feels like it's been forever, but in really lovely forever, because it's given me the chance to work with some huge companies all around the world. Our mission at Positive Purchasing is to help companies be really good at doing strategic procurement. And we do that through our strategic procurement platforms, through training, and through supporting companies to implement category management, supplier relationship management, sustainable procurement, and be really good at negotiation. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how some of that learning is shaping why we're doing this webinar in just a moment. But just a reminder, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A chat, because we're going to come back to those. So we're going to kind of get into what the webinar is about in just a moment. But as you hear something, just get that question to us, because we'd really like to have some real good, strong questions to come back to at the end. So how did we end up doing this webinar? Well, the simple matter is that facts and data are important for negotiation planning. So I've spent 20 years working with companies, helping companies develop their negotiation capability. We use the red sheet method that we developed 20 years ago, and it was developed because our customers said, can you come and help us sort out, be better at negotiating with suppliers? And we developed a methodology uniquely for procurement called Red Sheet, which is now used all over the world as the way big companies negotiate. And more recently, we developed Ruby, which is the negotiation co-pilot. It's AI powered and guides you through to create your negotiation plan, and also will role play that negotiation with you as well. So over those 20 years of helping companies be able to develop really good negotiation capability, the one thing that we have learned is that being prepared for negotiation is absolutely critical, and facts and data are absolutely key. So the question today is, we know that tech has got to be a key enabler to do this, but how do we leverage the tech? Really easy to say, yes, we need tech, but what exactly does that mean? If we just come back to some of the basics of what happens when we're negotiating, we're trying to negotiate well, then the strength of our position in any negotiation, it's all about understanding the balance of power. Power is not a value. It's not something you can easily put a measure on. It's a balance. So what power they have, we don't have, and vice versa. And when we're preparing for a negotiation, we are trying to understand who has that balance of power. In other words, who has the leverage or something that we can use, or the other party's trying to use against us to gain some sort of advantage. Key to understanding what that balance might look like is knowledge. The old phrase, knowledge is power, of course, is very relevant within a negotiation, but it's harder to actually do that. And in all the companies I've worked with, the one thing that companies don't do very well is have good knowledge when they go into a negotiation. And what that means is actually we may not know our position. So the hard reality about negotiation is quite often we're blind. At best, we're partially sighted, but we're often going in just relying on trying to kind of, have a good performance in the event. And suppliers are much, much better at buyers at being able to do that, because they're better trained, they're better equipped, And companies invest much more time and money into ensuring their sales team is really good at this and can get the edge. So already we're at a disadvantage. So we're at an even more of a disadvantage if we lack the facts and data to help us. So the secret of being able to negotiate really well is facts and data. Within procurement, we're historically not particularly good at being able to spend the time to really thoroughly do the homework that gives us that facts and data. Now, in any negotiation, there are 5 areas where one party or the other party can gain power. That is the power of dependency. So in other words, is one party more dependent on the other? And the test question there is, if we don't get this deal, or if we were to not have this supplier, would that create a problem? Similarly, if the supplier lost our business, how much of a deal would that be for them? So the degree of dependency. The second is the power that comes from the market and the strength of position in the market at any one time, not just in terms of supply and demand, but also in terms of how many suppliers there are and how dominant a supplier might be, and what we might be able to do to counter that. The third power is the power of relationships, and this should never be underestimated, but huge power can come from established relationships, especially if a supplier has a relationship at a very senior level, or they have some knowledge of our business that gives that supplier some sort of advantage in terms of how they negotiate with us. Time, of course, if one party has to make a deal, and this is again key in terms of having knowledge of this, because time is only a power if the other side knows that the opponent needs to make a deal or is up against a particular time constraint. So for a procurement person, that would typically be a contract is coming to an end and we have to put something new in place because we have no choice, we can't extend it, and the supplier knows that. And finally, the final power is the power of future opportunity. In other words, beyond the negotiation, but the potential growth and future volumes we might be able to offer a supplier, or the fact that a supplier may well be able to help us achieve some sort of competitive advantage or be able to help develop us and further grow our business into the future. So for each of those 5 powers, we need to understand what that balance looks like. And once we understand what that balance looks like, we then gain advantage in the negotiation by having alternatives. In any negotiation, power comes from having alternatives. Now, the final component to this, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, is the role of AI to help do that. And we're going to ask our guests about that in just a moment. But it's important to recognize that AI is playing an increasing role in how we gather facts and data, and how also those negotiations are supported and even conducted. So it is very much a changing landscape, but the fundamentals of negotiation remain pretty solid. And the one thing I think we can always be certain of is the human in the loop, the human dimension isn't about to change, but the way in which tech might help us is changing dramatically. So I think it's good to perhaps get into some of the questions that I have for our guests, and just remember once again as we go through there, if you have a question, please put that in the Q&A chat feature. But I want to begin, and I've got a question to both Rasa and Scott, and to Rasa, to you first. Why should we use tech, and how can tech help us plan better? Rasa.
Yeah, I think I just want to piggyback on what you just described in terms of the preparation and the fact that today within our organization, but also within our private life, we are bombarded with all different parts of data and information. So within the organization, within a procurement, this is no different. We are bombarded with different ERP systems, different other type of systems that transactions are happening and our stakeholders are working with, and as well as external data. And what the tech is doing for us in general, not specifically AI, is a tool which is basically helping us to absorb this information, harmonize this information, and turn them into insights, right? I think we need to be really distinguishing between data, noise, and insight. And technology is basically the biggest portion and biggest impact of the technology is its impact on turning data to trusted insight faster, cheaper, and continuously at a scale, right? That's what I see from our perspective. Scott?
So tech is a key enabler to getting that insight and being able to do something with it. Scott, please, your view.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, Jonathan, back to the fundamentals that you mentioned. I don't think technology changes those fundamentals, but what systems like Mithra and Positive and DeepStream allow people to do is to actually manage it in a better way. So rather than having information in spreadsheets, information in your ERP, information in analytics, it's all in one place. You know, Rasa used the word harmonized. I think that's a great way to look at it. That you can take a step back and say, well, what did we do last year? What are the bad activities that happened if we're running the RFXs that we do? What suppliers are we engaging with? How are the team managing that? That you've got all that in one place to actually help you make decisions. So again, you've probably got all that data today, regardless of the technology or lack of tech you have, but it's making it easily accessible so that in a much more, I guess, efficient fashion, you can make decisions for your next quarter, next year, and set your strategies with that information.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, you touched on something there that's particularly kind of in the minds of people I talk to. In other words, we've got the stuff there, but we're not quite sure what to do with it. And you specifically mentioned RFXs, which of course, something that procurement people, know and do. So if we use that as an example, so if we're running a supplier through some sort of RFX process, so what are the things that we should be doing using tech at this stage that can help us with the supply negotiation that comes later?
Yeah, so I think regardless of the RFX that you're going to do, setting out before you begin on, what do you want to get from this RFP and any potential negotiations. Obviously, if you're using a platform, you'll have historical information from previous RFXs you've run to learn from, what were the last outcomes? Was it effective? And the activity that we carried out, what did good look like? What were the prices? What was the information that we captured? So really use that information as your basis to go back to market. You should never start from square one every single time, whether it's retendering the same goods or services or going to market again. You should always be learning from what you've done previously. I think that you need to ensure that you're collecting both qualitative and quantitative information from suppliers to give you the best standing when it comes to those negotiations. So again, if you don't ask for that information, don't know what good is going to look like for you or what you want to achieve, you're kind of making it up as you go along or deciding after you've run the RFP what you want to get out of it, which means you're not going to have that information from the suppliers.
Yeah, and I think it's true to say it's a common error within procurement people to construct an RFP based on let's ask a series of nice questions, and you end up asking pointless questions like tell us how many people work there, or tell us which parts of the world you operate, which kind of we want to know that stuff is pretty irrelevant to the negotiation. So designing the RFP with the negotiation in mind.
Yeah.
Rasa, we've got huge experience of working with category managers and helping category managers be able to run through a process and be able to put a category strategy in place. But traditionally, that's based on having really good information and being able to really understand the marketplace, understand the supply base, understand what's happening internally. If we then think about the tech that's available and what you guys do in particular, what should category managers be looking for? In other words, what is the type of data that we need?
Yeah, so I think generally, depending on the company and the type of the category of a spend, there are certain internal and external type of data that are most sought after. So the internal part you already mentioned, category owner needs to understand what are the requirements of that category from the stakeholder, whether those are products or services. Those requirements needs to be basically translated into data point. Need to understand what is the objective of the company, right? Where the company as a whole is going and what kind of commitments that company is basically delivering, whether those are ESGs or D and I, those are things that a category owner need to be capturing as part of the requirements. Next to that, you just mentioned in terms of understanding what is the actual supply base that the company is utilizing today and how that supply base is utilized. And when we look into external, obviously, as you mentioned, it becomes critical that category managers are aware of type of innovations and type of innovation that market exists in the market and is relevant to the company. It is really, really important to understand the risk exposure of their supply based on their specific category, whether those type of risks are relevant for this company or not, what type of risk, et cetera, and the compliance part of the suppliers. So I think these elements, both from internal and external, really providing that 360-degree for a category owner to understand where they would like to drive this category and what are those key milestones or roadblocks for them that they need to be aware and orchestrate the stakeholders as well.
And Rasa, if I may have one more question, I mean, within that data, spend data is clearly going to be a sort of key part of that data set. But, what happens if we try and go into a negotiation and we just don't understand the spend?
Yeah, so I think we all have been in many negotiation sessions before in the audience as well. And with negotiations, I mean in front of our supplier or also in front of our stakeholder group, where we got corrected during the session. So as you mentioned, one of the biggest part for every negotiation is the preparation and setting what is the goal that we want to get out of this session. And we will never, ever be able to set goals if we don't know what our baseline is. And spend data and the overview is what is providing our baseline to us, but also really aligning us with our stakeholders and our suppliers as well. Many, many times, this can be turning sudden surprises in a negotiation session into an advantage, a win-win opportunity, for the stakeholder and for the supplier if they know there is certain insight. I just give you an example. We have one of our customers recognize that they do actually do twice as much as they think they do business with Amazon. And given this information, they could actually change their rate and negotiate with Amazon much, much easier rather than basically looking into initial spend that they had. So like you just mentioned, knowledge is definitely power. And if we don't have that knowledge when we entering a negotiation or even a supplier review, it hits our credibility and it weakens our position. So I think it's absolutely critical that we are able to do our homework and we are even able to educate our stakeholders and suppliers ahead. And that shows how credible we are and we know what we want and where we can get to.
Yeah, knowledge is absolutely power in a negotiation. And, back to something I said earlier, we are quite often blind in a negotiation, or at best we're partially sighted. Scott, I'm really interested in kind of how you guys can help with the, what's called the holy grail of negotiation. In other words, if you could go into a negotiation and you knew your final position, I mean, imagine that, that would make it really easy. You're not kind of feeling your way. You know where you've got to get to. You understand that position. You know what the competitor landscape looks like. So, how can tech and data help us to know what that kind of endpoint that we're working towards is?
Yeah, so I think that at two levels, you've probably got to look at historically what your company has done. So at that micro level of if we're retendering or we've been acquiring these goods and services before, look at what you've done previously. And again, it's not all about price as we've spoken about. So you may have paid, a dollar for that previously, but did you get value? Did you feel like that was good value for you? So again, use your own data. And I think that for those kind of more common goods and services, there's a lot of information out there in the market. So what are the commodity rates? You can find out things like, cost of software, as we're all aware, through other services. So I think that you really need to use all that information at your disposal. Um, but also, I think that you need to understand from your business what they actually want to get from the service that you're looking at. Okay, so yeah, if you've got all that information, work with your business to understand what does good look like. Again, it's not just the cheapest is the best. We all know that. We all work in procurement. There's more to it than money, and it's about that balance, I think. So absolutely have that information to hand. Talk with your suppliers about that, and I think being open and honest in that negotiation, saying, "Look, we understand the rates. We've had this better previously. There's nothing wrong with being upfront with that. I don't see that as overplaying your hand. I think that's a good, honest conversation to have. But I do think that you need to be slightly cautious and not just go after the money.
Yeah.
There's a lot of high-profile mistakes that I've seen in, mainstream media and news around people that just focus on the money. So by all means, back yourself with that information, but don't let that be the sole focus of what you do when you're looking for that holy grail.
That's really good advice. And one more question, if I may, Scott, because I just
Yeah.
want to draw on your experience of running e-auctions and supporting e-auctions with the data and the ability to do that. So I guess the question is, how can we know when we should just do an e-auction? So do we run an e-auction, or do we actually go and do a sort of full negotiation? And if we sort of think about what is traditionally called good procurement practice, we would typically say you run an e-auction in just only in certain areas. So where it's undifferentiated, it's generic, there are multiple competitors within the supplier landscape, and so an e-auction would work. So that's the traditional view on e-auction. I mean, is that still the case? Or, should we just say we don't need negotiation anymore? We can just put it all into a modern AI-powered e-auction tool, because that's just going to do everything. Or do we still need negotiation for the differentiated complex stuff?
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, coming from somebody whose software lets you run e-auctions, I'm a big fan of them. I think that the very old conception, maybe misconceptions, that it only works for the simple stuff. I think that needs to be challenged now. I mean, I know that market leaders in the industry have run, over 100 different categories through e-auctions. To me, the one mandatory thing is a competitive landscape. I think as long as you've got that competitive landscape with your suppliers, you can work with it. However, this is where the technology versus human element comes into for me, Jonathan, that you've got to have the knowledge and the insights and I guess the feeling from the responses and the way you've spoken to your suppliers that whether any option is a good idea. Absolutely, I think that we should challenge the status quo and say, oh, it's not complicated, it's too complicated, or this isn't the type of thing for an auction. You should be asking, why can't we run an auction? Every strategy should say we reserve the right to run any auction. But to me, you've got to understand the market and whether that's doing some indicative pricing, looking at commodity rates, or running an RFP first, and then deciding to do it. Again, I think that the RFP and the auction combination is the optimum way to do this. You understand the quality and technical responses from your suppliers, which are vital. It's not all about money, as I mentioned before. You get that initial pricing, and if it looks competitive, we all know the efficiencies that e-auctions bring, whereas it's a one to many rather than many to one if you're trying to negotiate with your suppliers, and it can reduce weeks of work into minutes or hours. So the advantage is there, but I think that you've got to have the information to hand each time you do that. It's not a one answer for everything. I still think that there needs to be that human element of making each decision when you get that engagement from your suppliers.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And sort of building on this is a question for you, Rasa. I think I'm going to mention the AI thing now. So, can AI help with negotiation preparation? So, is negotiation something, we know negotiation is something that you can train and you can learn. And even with the best data and tools, sometimes you still need to talk to somebody within the process to be able to do it. So can we be completely AI reliant and phase out procurement and just let the AI take over? Or do you still think we need procurement people here? What do you think?
It's a question that I'm getting quite a lot. I was 2 weeks ago in Frankfurt, and that was one of the key questions that we get from the audience. Absolutely, AI is not here to replace the human and the procurement practitioners. AI here is just a new tool in the toolbox to be able to be facilitating preparation and support and brainstorm negotiation for the procurements. And it's a very fair statement to say that AI-powered procurement is about number of decisions and policies that wouldn't have been there otherwise, right? So it's not about your top 10 suppliers that you know everything about them and you're on top of everything and they know you. It's about the rest of the 1900 suppliers that you never had a chance to look and you never knew that there is purchases happening with them. AI is there to help you to automate those decisions and create policies who are able to orchestrate the spend across the company, align with the company objectives and constraints, right? So it's very, very critical. I think I spend quite a lot of my time with the procurement teams to just go through these examples together to educate ourselves how we can best utilize this tool. It's just a new tool in a toolbox. It's helping us to do better and to do more faster and more reliable. So I think that's my take.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. One of the things that we've sort of heard people talking about a lot is you've got to treat AI like it's another member of the team. It's not there to take your job. It's another member of the team that you work with and you collaborate with and will help you and advise you. But it's there to work with you, not phase you out. And I think it's important to bear that in mind. I'm going to jump to some of the questions now. We've got a question from Arjun Bertson. Thank you for your question. Arjun says, can you give an example of using AI to prepare a round one negotiation after having done the RFQ and bid analysis? Who wants to have a go at answering that?
Yeah, I can jump in and see how we manage with that one, and Arjun can tell me if I've completely missed the point. So yeah, I think that the examples there is kind of what Rasa alluded to, but on a kind of micro level, that the effort it takes to look across all bids, process that information, understand what good looks like in the modeling is time consuming, let's be honest. Um, we've all heard and we've all discussed this in procurement that there's never a time when more has been asked of less people to perform. So that AI tool can really help you quickly take an analysis of the bids, make suggestions of ask for this, tweak this, that's the best alternative, or ask them if they can come up with this answer. So really to me, it's feeding in the information that you could, as a human, absolutely figure that out, but it could take you hours or days to do that. The AI, if you've got to set up correctly, will give you that answer in minutes. So I think it's actually an efficiency perspective. It's not, as Jonathan and Andra said, it's not taking your job, it's letting you do that quicker. The number of customers that I've got and I had in past lives where speed to market is vital, that's where I see it as a winner. So you might end up with the same outcome, probably better because you aren't trying to do this manually, but you're going to get there in a much more efficient fashion, and you've got that assurance that something or someone else has looked at this as well as you. So really, to me, it's an efficiency point. And again, it makes you look great from a supply perspective when you come back, so quickly and so frankly with them. Great, thanks, Arjun.
Yeah, no, great question. Let's just do another one now from Soren Petch, who says, I'd love to dive much deeper into how to integrate into the procurement process seamlessly or automatically. I use Perplexity.ai and ChatGPT today. The problem is that I find myself copying and pasting between systems. So I'm very much in the middle of the data flow, which is fine, but it's not great. Rasa, is that one you can give a view on?
Yeah, sure. So today we have the benefit of being able to test and play around with a lot of open source projects. OpenAI, so ChatGPT is obviously the one that everybody knows. Perplexity is research that I think soon is going to be replacing Google. So if you're on this webinar and you haven't used it, please use it the next time. The goal, however, is a scalability and reliability of this tool, right? So if you want to utilize AI or, by the way, any other technology, I think the key point here is to understand your process, because the technology needs to be working alongside of your processes and your people. and be able to be building a pipeline in that process across utilizing these tools. So I definitely do not recommend to utilize ChatGPT and Perplexity as an out of the box for your organization. I would definitely recommend to utilize it, as you just mentioned, as a test environment to just see and set expectations for the organization. But the right way of utilizing it is to have your own models in a secure and compliance environment within your organization and really wrapped in within your procurement process, that you do have this loop and avoid exactly what you mentioned, copy of pasting, that there is a loop that these models are learning and being basically reinforced. I think that's where you will be able to see the majority of the value, and it really takes a village to get there, right? It takes the adoption of the stakeholders, it takes the adoption of the organization. So I think what you're doing is indeed the first part, to be building the use case to show the benefits that you can get from here. But I think reliability and scalability is going to be the critical part of the business case of any AI solution, right? And that needs to be part of your organization in a way that is safe, controllable, and compliance, right?
Yeah. And something you said in there that is really, really important, which is have your AI within your own environment, your own wall-gardened AI, because this is critical. A lot of people think, hey, I'm just going to put this out onto ChatGPT and ask it the question.
Yes.
Everything you put onto ChatGPT, you are putting out there, and it will learn from that, even though it says it won't. It will learn from that, and it will give your competitors an advantage, and it's sucking that data. That's how it works. So, really important to remember to have it within your own environment. Another question from Soren: do you use AI to provide training and feedback to your team or yourself? I'm going to take that one, if I may, because and I'm going to talk about Ruby, which is our negotiation co-pilot tool, and what we did within that was to create this wall-gardened AI capability that accesses all of our experience of negotiation. And once you have planned your negotiation, it then role plays with you. So what we learned, and the thing about AI, the thing that really surprised us as we built this thing, is what AI can do if you train it on good content. And when the development team sort of first showed us this, we then started to role play with it, and it blew us away how it managed to role play a negotiation really effectively. And we didn't think we'd even started training it, but actually, it had trained itself. So yes, AI absolutely will train you how to negotiate by doing it for real. But, to build on the comments earlier in the conversation, you need to couple that with real training in the human interaction, the human experience as well. Those two things together, AI role play, human role play, prior to a negotiation, and of course the planning using tech to figure out how you're going to leverage the best outcome, gives you a really, really powerful result. Another question that has come in privately on the chat. So Scott, this is one for you, I think. What role does data play in building trust during a digital negotiation?
Well, yeah, really good question. So I think that definitely builds trust, but also reliability for the buyers, both for your internal stakeholders, but also your suppliers. So if you're coming from a solid database internally, that you're working with, say, your evaluators or the original business requester, they're reassured that you're coming from a good place and you're not letting emotions take over or showing preferences towards certain people in the supply chain. And then from your suppliers, to be honest, nobody likes to be negotiated with, right? But it's a part of the job and it's part of the role. We all know what happens. But at least, again, they know that you're coming from a solid base of, here is information we have to hand. This is what we're working off. Again, you're not pulling figures out of the air. You're not trying to pull the wool over their eyes with different metrics. So I think that does provide a reliable base to work with your suppliers on, if they know that that's there. So for me, it is crucially important. But again, you've got to be responsible enough to not misuse that. it takes years to build up trust and relationship with your suppliers, and one, call it dodgy negotiation, to lose that. So I think that you need to be fair and open with your suppliers and how you engage with them. Again, you might do something clever to get one quick win, but ultimately that's going to come back to haunt you. So I think that, yeah, use it to your advantage, but also use it in a fair and transparent way.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. And I think one building on that, another question, the Rasa, I think this is one for you. What would you say? What are your top tips for if we need to balance a cost-based, cost savings negotiation with maintaining a strong supplier relationship if we're using a data-driven negotiation approach?
So I think that's a complex question in terms of balancing short-term cost savings versus long-term gain from the supplier. I actually had this exact same question 2 weeks ago, which is really funny. So the questions are being kind of repeated, so it's top of the mind. And my answer was, again, I'm very data savvy, data biased person. If you have access to your data from that supplier, you would understand what is what we call a reach and richness of that supplier. What is basically the impact of that supplier into your business from the products or services that you're basically providing, right? Um, you can have a subjective idea about this, but you can have a very objective if you have access to the data. So what we do is to basically quantify what we call reach and richness utilizing the data. How many business units is this supplier working with? What kind of products and categories and subcategories of products or services are you receiving? How critical are these products and services that you're receiving from this supplier? And this is internally. On the other side, you're going to be balancing out, okay, how unique this supplier is, for these products and services that is providing. So you're kind of going back into diagram that you shared at the beginning of this part. It basically signifies what is dependency of me to this supplier. And if I have a high dependency on the supplier based on the data, then I'm better off to bet on my long-term relationship and tapping into innovation and the network that this supplier has versus trying to be squeezing them for 2%, 3% quarter over quarter, right? So it's what we do is to utilize data to kind of segment the supplier base. Is this supplier critical? Is this supplier strategical? Is this supplier a transactional supplier across these categories of spend? And then once you have this overview, I think then the answer will be very, very straightforward, and you can make this balance in a way that it benefits, both the supplier but also you and the customers ultimately.
Good answer. And we're just about at the end of our webinar now. I have one final question to you both. In 30 seconds, Rasa first, where should a team start if they've never used procurement tech before?
A great question. Simple answer, build a simple use case and build it simple, build it manually, bring it in front of as many people, peers, decision makers. Let them be comfortable. Let them ask questions. Let them shoot hole in it, right? Just let them be comfortable with it. So start with a simple use case, get the basically the commitment and the confidence of your group, and then slowly start scaling up in a way that is future proof and it is scalable, right? That would be my advice.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Scott, in 30 seconds,
Yeah. So I think being selfish, I think you should start with the sourcing processes. Of course, I'm going to say that before we finish the call. Yeah, no, all joking aside, I think a combination of getting a hold and an understanding of your data, but then how you execute upon that. I've worked with very complex, very simple, very out there systems over the past kind of dozen years. I think that you need to understand what you've got to improve upon. That's the data part that obviously Rasa can help with. But then you've got to have something in place to actually manage that and execute upon it. And that's where I think the kind of sourcing processes are so important. Everything above that, I think, comes as a second and third stage.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you both so much. Rasa Raoufi from Mithra AI, thank you for your time and sharing your insights. Scott Farrance from DeepStream, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on this webinar. If you're on this call, then you'll get a recording of this, I think within about 2 days. But also we'd love for you to stay in touch with all of us. You've got 3 companies on this call at the forefront of using tech to enable your negotiations. So if you scan that QR code, then we would love to stay in touch. Please do that. And a shameless plug for the Procurement Show podcast. If you haven't caught up with it, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple, or just ask your smart speaker to play The Procurement Show. We have some astonishingly good guests that take the time to join us. So it'd be great if you could join us for that. Thank you so much for attending, everybody. Hope you've got something out of this. It's been a pleasure. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.